and see if they can hear us. We can be heard? Excellent. Okay.
Give us a thumbs up.
Susan, can you hear us?
I can now.
Excellent. Thank you. I was summarizing the charts on the screen for you, more just explaining those to those who weren't necessarily reading all of the things.
Right.
All right, so the retained parcel is vacant, no new development proposed at this time. And the lands over which the right-of-way extension will travel is also vacant currently. The extension to the right-of-way will follow the existing driveway access to the house for the property municipally addressed as 1441 Williams Lane. See if I can get this to this. All right, so here on the next slide, you can see Williams Lane is highlighted in red. Williams Lane is a private road that connects to Tryon Road, which is a township municipally maintained road. Williams Lane was historically known as the Old Tryon Road, as it was quite a long time ago the main path through here, and then Williams Lane became known as Williams Lane through a renaming in 2018. The subject property that is the severed parcel and the retained parcel, you can see outlined in red, severed parcel in yellow, with the lane extension also shown in yellow. As I said, it follows the driveway of the existing development. So this application was circulated for review. There was no septic evaluation required, as the severed parcel has existing septic service and on-site services, and the retained lot at 180 acres is sufficiently sized to accommodate development should it be developed in the future. There's most likely somewhere to put a septic on that size of a property. As part of this evaluation, because we are looking at creating a right-of-way over an existing private lane, the Frontenac County Private Road Study standards requires that any existing lanes where you're accessing no more than 3 lots be constructed to a level that is suitable for the emergency services vehicle access. So the Township Public Works Department and Township Fire Services Department went out together and reviewed the condition of the existing lane as well as the proposed lane extension. Based on their review, there is no upgrades required to the existing Williams Lane to facilitate the emergency services access. The right-of-way extension will be surveyed at 20 meters wide and constructed in accordance with the county private lanes new lane standard. Standards for cleared width, gravel surface, things like that. There's a whole chart and engineering that go with that. As I said, there's no requirement for septic. These applications were circulated to Rideau Valley Conservation Authority, as there's a number of wetlands and watercourses on the subject property and in proximity to the existing Williams Lane. Comments from the Conservation Authority, dated August 12th of this year, stated no objections to either application as proposed. The Conservation Authority reviewed both of these applications with regards to natural hazards, as is their purview under provincial designation and authority. They noted that there were no marine clays, organic soils, or map floodplain hazards identified in proximity to the subject. No map floodplain hazards in respect to the proposed lot. They did note that the subject property, so the one the lot's coming from, does have some steep slopes on it, and future development on the retained parcel should be planned in a way to avoid these areas. They also noted that permission would be required from the Conservation Authority for any future alterations to watercourses located on the property, or including but not limited to, say, culvert installation for roads, bridge crossings, anything to do with diverting, dredging, realigning, or stabilizing watercourses or water bodies. There were comments received from the public. So initially this application was to be considered through the delegated approval process. However, there were comments raised by a member of the public that staff were unable to address to the satisfaction of all parties involved, and therefore it was elevated to a committee decision. So these comments from a neighbor in through a letter from a lawyer regarding the creation of the right-of-way over the existing Williams Lane to facilitate the creation of the proposed lot. So the concerns expressed in that letter, again, there's more details in the letter that were attached to the agenda. This is more of a summation. Concerns were regarding the standard of construction of Williams Lane, primarily prior to the township approval of bylaw number 2021-44. And this bylaw was passed by council in 2021 to stop up, close, and transfer ownership of the lands over which Williams Lane crosses. So as I noted, it was previously known as Old Tryon Lane. And so the township had an interest and had passed a bylaw in 2006 granting the Stinsons permission to use Williams Lane to access their property, which is the property which the new lot will come from. And Williams Lane meets up with the road allowance at the edge of their property and links them up to Tryon Road. Without this access, they would not have been able to develop the property, including the construction of any of the buildings that are on the property currently. The public comments also stated that there's insufficient access to the proposed lot due to continued failure to comply with the provisions of bylaw number 2006-2008, which, as I noted, permitted the use of the unmaintained Old Tryon Road, now known as Williams Lane. And this bylaw permitted this use subject to a number of conditions, including a minimum road construction standards and some other things that were put into place by the council at that time. Further, these public comments noted some concerns regarding potential natural hazards with proximity to Williams Lane, including flooding and potential washout, culvert sizing, and so there's beaver dams on the properties on either side of Williams Lane. And as I'm sure committee knows, as they are also council, there's been some challenges with beaver dams and washouts and flooding in the township this year. So this is absolutely a valid concern. So all of these things were looked into, and the response from planning staff, again, there's many more details in the planning report. But currently, Williams Lane is privately owned and maintained, as has been since 2021. And therefore, county planning staff referenced the Frontenac County Private Roads/Lane Study, which was put in place in 2016 in order to determine the appropriate road construction standards to be applied to both the existing portion of Williams Lane, so that's through application 18, to create a right-of-way in favor of the subject property, as well as the proposed extension in application 17, where the extension of Williams Lane over the retained parcel. Again, details on the applicable sections of the county private roads policy can be found in the planning report. As a result of that review, the extension of Williams Lane shall be constructed in accordance of the new lane construction standards set out in that private road study, and the existing Williams Lane shall be sufficient for emergency services vehicle access. As I noted, both fire services and public works have been out and have determined that the existing lane is sufficient, and that provided the new lane is constructed to the private lane standards, there should be no concerns with access to emergency services to the property and the new lot. As a result of review of all comments received, planning staff are recommending that the committee approve both applications 17 and 18 as submitted for the creation of the new lot, the right-of-way extension, and the right-of-way over the existing Williams Lane. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Jenny. Would the applicant or your agent want to make any additional comments? Just push that button and the light will come on.
Thank you, Madam
your name?
Madam Chair, my name is Jason Sands. I'm a registered professional planner and a member of the Canadian Institute of Planners, and I'm here on behalf of the owner, Mary Stinson. The only thing I'd like to add is we've reviewed all conditions applicable to the two applications, the 9 and the 14 conditions. We have no concerns, and we want to thank staff, both at the county and the township levels, for the expedited processing of this application and understanding that it needed to be bumped up for the reasons that we had concerns from a neighbor. And we support the recommendation, and we're here to answer any questions that you may have.
Any questions or comments for Jason? Okay, seeing none. We will then ask if there's anyone from the public who would like to make a submission to us. Is there anyone online, Chris?
Yes, there is. One moment. Okay, Alice, your mic has been unmuted.
Can you hear us, Alice?
Madam Chair, apologies. Are you able to hear me?
We can, but we just have to turn the volume up a little bit. Okay,
Okay, let me see what I can do.
that's much better.
That should be good.
Okay, thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thank you to all the members. Apologies for the audio issues today, but hopefully you can hear me. My name is Alice Mihailescu, and I am here on behalf of Blair Sheridan, one of the neighbors. Mr. Sheridan is the owner of property located adjacent to 1141 Williams Lane, where the severance and the creation of the right-of-way is being proposed. Mr. Sheridan provided extensive comments on the planning merits of these applications, as per the letter it's in front of you, which begin on page 21 of the package, as well as some contextual photographs and explanations that are found in the emails, which begin on page 48 of the package. Now, I don't propose today to reiterate everything in those materials that you have reviewed, but I do want to focus in on some of the significant concerns associated and still outstanding with granting the consent at 1141 Williams Lane. And there is a fair bit of history regarding the private road, which provides access, which is where many of these concerns come from. And it really boils down to questions of access to the properties in the future and today, and safety issues. And this is evidence, some of the concerns are evidenced through historical and continued failure to comply with bylaw 2006-208, which is the one which granted use of the unmaintained Old Tyrone Road. And those issues and the compliance with those standards still remain concerning today. So today I'm just going to touch quickly upon some of these facts to give you a bit of context on the bylaw 2006-208, and then really dive into the comments on the planning report and make submissions on that side. So in terms of the facts, access to the property is currently facilitated by a sole private lane, which was formerly known as Old Tyrone Road. And pursuant to bylaw 2006-208, the Township of Central Frontenac provided permission to the property's owners at the time, the Stinsons, to use the unmaintained Old Tyrone Road, starting at the travel Tyrone Road at Lot 6, Concession 6, and continuing through to Lot 6, Concessions 7 and 8 to the property. But notably, this was as long as certain conditions were fulfilled. And these conditions include that any road built on Old Tyrone Road, so the current Williams Lane, shall be built to the private road standards adopted by the Township of Central Frontenac. And I just note that it's mandatory language, which is why we are looking at how the road is built and whether it is safe today to support this severance application. And looking at the facts, the road that has been built, which today is referred to as Williams Lane, has not been built to the necessary private lane construction standard. Despite nearly 18 years since the passing of the bylaw, the road continues to be deficient. And I'll note of particular concern, Williams Lane does not meet requirements regarding the right-of-way width, granular shoulder, and the minimum depth from the road center line to the bottom of the ditch. Safety impacts of the failure of Williams Lane to comply with the bylaw are significant, and they're exacerbated if the severance goes ahead, as the road provides the sole access to the property, and it's located near significant environmental features, as you've heard today. Furthermore, I'll note that Williams Lane has been built below the water level with insufficient culverts in place, which result in the palpable likelihood of significant flooding and damage should the dam let go. And the responsibility for safety is not just on the property owners who have these dams, such as Mr. Sheridan, but also in terms of, we don't want to exacerbate the issues. And that's why consideration needs to be given to the entire property, including the property which the severance application covers. So granting the severance application would only heighten the effects of a substandard road construction. And similarly, we talk about the road construction and the standards and whether they have been met. I note that Mr. Sheridan has provided an easement on these lands as a right-of-way to use the road. And it's recognized, including by the owners, that this is a single-lane road, which doesn't easily allow for the passage of vehicles. And for safety reasons, Mr. Sheridan, for instance, must provide notice to use the road. Kind of to tie this into the comments on the application and to respond specifically to the comments in the planning report. Planning staff have noted, for instance, the ownership of Williams Lane being privately owned by the applicant. And as such, I quote, the township does not have any interest in the land. But this does not extinguish the prior obligations in bylaw 2006-208. And the phrasing of this bylaw was very clear that use of the road was built on fulfillment of certain conditions, which included being built to the private road standards. So to say now that the road is privately owned and the township can't do anything about it, we're not asking for a whole redevelopment of the road. We simply want to ensure that access to the property, should the severance be granted, is properly maintained and it is safe for all users of the road. The application of the Frontenac County Private Roads Lane Studies 2016 is supplementary and does not displace the requirements under bylaw 2006-208. And if you were to actually look at the standards, there isn't a huge difference. I think it's, again, is the road safe for passage of vehicles and other methods of transportation. What's important in this application is the reality of the road standards, whether it's met and whether it is sufficient to advance the severance application before you today. Moving on to discussion of natural hazards. In terms of the Rideau Valley Conservation Authority having no concerns, just noting that their comments do continue to highlight that there are watercourses on the property and proposed alterations would trigger the written permission of the RVCA or the Mississippi Valley Conservation Authority. And this is found on pages 40 to 41 of the planning report in the package before you. So our client similarly seeks that the consent applications, if granted, do include a condition where notice be provided to RVCA and MVCA before work on the property is commenced, and that including on Williams Lane. And in terms of safety and adequacy of Williams Lane, which is what my submissions really turn on, the committee has been provided with no report from the township of Central Frontenac Public Works Department or Fire Services. All that is before you, Madam Chair and council members, is reference to email correspondence that indicates the fire chief and public works manager had visited the properties and determined that Williams Lane is suitable for emergency service access. But there's no indications what standards were applied, what portions of the road were inspected, and it's particularly relevant since the road runs for an extended portion. Williams Lane runs along 2499 Tyrone Road for approximately a mile in an area where there are 3 large beaver ponds on Mr. Sheridan's property and other natural heritage features around. Again, the risk for future issues are raised if the severance goes forward and the road is not properly constructed. So while I appreciate that the town has gone to inspect this, neither myself nor Mr. Sheridan nor you today really have those details about what the road standards are like and what the determination that emergency vehicles can safely traverse on it really truly means. Also, my final comment in terms of the responding to the planning report, and I'll keep it brief, is that it's mentioned that no new development is proposed at this time. And the report does mention, though, that without obtaining an official plan amendment or applying for a plan of subdivision, the maximum number of lots that could be accessed is free. And honestly, that is more than the current single dwelling that exists now. So granting the severance today, granting this severance, truly opens the door for development. And I'm cognizant that more approvals would be needed for very large scale development, but it is so critical that the applications before you today, granting them, are in compliance with the criteria in sections 51-24 of the Planning Act. And that ties back to the condition of the road. So just to sum it up, and I know I've taken quite a bit of time and I appreciate everyone's time, but what Mr. Sheridan is looking for today is that the severance does not go ahead at this time, given the outstanding concerns of the suitability of the road and access to the property if the severance goes ahead. In the alternative, looking at the conditions in Appendix A, I'll note that paragraph 4, the standards only speak to the Williams Lane extension and not to the existing road. And we would ask that the same conditions in terms of the construction of the private lane are applied to the entirety of the road to ensure that it is safe for users. And we are similarly asking that if the committee does grant the applications, the following conditions be included, including that that the entirety of Williams Lane be constructed in accordance with the Frontenac County private lane studies, including the existing portions of the road, and the condition that notice be provided to the RVCA and MVCA before work on the property is commenced, including on Williams Lane pursuant to the regulations. And I know that was quite a bit of information. I am open to any questions, and I thank you for the opportunity to make submissions today.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Alice or any comments? Jason, would you like to respond at all?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I've made it some comments of what we've just heard, and I suspect county planning staff as well have a response. My initial response, Madam, will, if I may, exempt the 2006-208 bylaw reference. I feel that's more appropriate for staff to be addressing as opposed to the applicant. My personal comment to that is that it was several decades ago. We're looking at an application today that gives consideration to the policies of the day. And we have to give an understanding of how this proposal complies with those, as opposed to what was done and the potential of lack of enforcement from the municipality or the county's end to a bylaw that was in effect nearly 20 years ago. Moving on, I made a comment that expressed concern related to the exacerbated use of the road should this application for consent proceed this evening. From a planning perspective, in my opinion, I am consistent with what you've heard from the planners at the county and your staff in the recommendation, in the sense that the overall development plan before you this evening does not seek to increase the density on this property. Yes, I will full-heartedly agree that there is the future opportunity to include development on the retained parcel, that 180 plus or minus acred parcel. So there is a potential that you do see increased density. That being said, the intent of this application is solely to subdivide the existing residence constructed approximately 8 years ago at the terminus of the lane to ensure it's on a separately conveyable parcel. There is no increased development proposed. There was reference in the county staff report as it relates to the extension of a private lane. And I think that what is potentially issuing some confusion related to an extension of A or an extension of B, plan a subdivision versus consent. But I know county staff can explain that in far greater detail than I. But I would like to confirm there is no extension of a private lane to facilitate increased residential density. It is solely to recognize what's there and restrict that on an approximately 7-acre property with an easement, of course, over the retained portion, because it would be then a separately conveyable parcel. The next comment that I've made note from the presentation was, is the road safe with respect to the passing of vehicles? I'm a professional planner. I'm not a public works manager, nor am I an emergency services professional. I, along with what I would encourage you to do, is lean on what you've heard from your staff. We've had confirmation from the public works manager and the fire chief that there is no concern with respect to the usage of that lane for emergency vehicle access. I've personally driven the lane approximately 2.5 hours ago, and there were multiple turnouts. There was multiple opportunities for passing on the lane. I did not have a concern getting down and traversing that lane in a very small vehicle, a little 4-cylinder car. Again, county planning staff can speak to this, but it's my understanding that a separate report or standalone report that is being referenced by the concerns brought forth from on behalf of Mr. Sheridan from the fire chief or public works manager would be uncharacteristic in my experience. Typically, a planning report surmises all of the technical commentary that you receive through the processing of a Planning Act application. So fire chief, Rideau Valley Conservation, Public Works, et cetera. And that's what you have before you this evening. Yes, it's in the form of an email, but typically emails are the form of communications for technical circulations. So I don't see any reason or rationalization as to why that's uncharacteristics in this situation. The Rideau Valley Conservation Authority was a comment that was brought forward, and specifically the comment stating that there are water courses on the property. Yes, I can concur. I've driven it, I've been on it, and many of you can probably suspect that a nearly 200-acre property does contain water courses. And yes, there are beaver ponds. We live in that part of the country. So the owner also does acknowledge that. I will say that on her behalf, who's sitting behind me this evening. We recognize that Rideau Valley Conservation Authority's approval is required for any alterations to natural heritage features or natural hazards features. That's not anything new or any of sort of concern. I just made note the consent application of today allows for future development. That was spoken to by the concerns raised on behalf of Mr. Sheridan's solicitor. I fundamentally disagree with the comment. The comment is the proposal is to subdivide the existing dwelling, not increase development. Should multiple vacant lots be proposed through this application, through subsequent applications submitted concurrently with this, then I would agree. We are proposing to increase or add density, residential density in this context. That's not the situation in whatsoever. The last comment that I'd want to address would be speaking to condition 4. It was brought forward with the request of Mr. Sheridan's solicitor to extend the condition to be more expansive than the way it's drafted so that it incorporates the entirety of Williams Lane. My reading of that is we're talking about approximately an 850-meter stretch of the right-of-way. And truthfully, in my opinion, this comment is redundant and unnecessary. We already have confirmation, I shouldn't say we, you as the Committee of Adjustment have confirmation from the 2 staff members who would make this determination, the roads manager and the fire chief, as to the suitability of that private lane for emergency services and ingress egress for vehicular movement. We've already confirmed that that is not of issue. So the way this condition's drafted, that speaks to essentially we need to ensure through the satisfying of conditions that that section of lane is to the specification of the private road study, to me is redundant because if that's the study, the 2016 is the latest study that we're following, we're understanding that what we're doing in the private road realm is consistent with that. That's what their comment would be based on. All that being said, I have no concern with it being included because, again, in my opinion, they're going to come out, satisfy the condition by confirming that it does comply with that 2016 standard. I do not agree fundamentally that this should be incorporated to extend for the entirety of the lane. We've not received any concerns from anybody on staff, from emergency services, or from any other ratepayer with respect to access, nor emergency services access to the property. So to me, it's unnecessary that we seek an extension for that condition. Those are the conditions I had, Madam Chair. I'm happy to answer anything that I may have missed, or if anything county staff would like me to add. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Jason. Any questions or comments to Jason's information? Duncan?
I have questions for, sorry, Madam Chair, I have questions for Sonia, actually. Jenny, sorry, my head. So I just want to confirm, because I'm trying to read all these conditions. So there's no condition in here that requires them to notify the conservation authorities if they're doing work on the property, just if they're doing work on to natural features. Is that correct?
That's correct. There's no condition with regards to that because all conditions of consent need to be able to be fulfilled prior to the signing of the certificate of official. So putting in a condition that is at some point in the future is unreasonable, as it would not be able to be satisfied to get that consent certificate signed.
Okay, so it's not in there. Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? I guess just one comment that I'd have is that a lot of our township roads are single lanes still in spots. So that's not unusual. I see this as basically being a long entrance to one property at the end. And as far as safety and water and beaver dams, I think every road we have in our collection of 600 kilometers of road has beaver dams along it. Probably many of them in some spots. So this is not an unusual piece of property or an unusual lane with the same problems that a lot of our municipal maintained township roads have. Lynn.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I'm just curious to hear if Jenny has anything further to add after all of the comments have been made.
I don't have anything specific to add. If there's questions, I can answer them. I detailed a lot of my opinion and the planning opinion in the report. As I said, there seemed to be some confusion perhaps with regards to development potential and lot creation. So the private lanes does have a major and minor extension. Up to 3 new lots is considered a minor extension, and this has that potential. Again, in the township, you can only create 2 new lots from any parcel that existed as of 2008. So unless they were going through some sort of official plan amendment for that to permit additional lots or a plan of subdivision or other such things, the development potential of this lane extension is going to be a maximum of 3, and therefore the minor extension condition was applied. Should further lots be created or proposed that equal 4 or more as that potential, then the policy would require the upgrade of the entire length of Williams Lane to the current private lane standards. However, as I said, without subsequent planning applications, including much larger applications like official plan or subdivision or condominium, there is no potential for anything more than a maximum of 3 lots, even with the current lane extension.
Okay, I'm going to read the motion, and if you think of, oh, sorry, Chris or someone.
Yeah, Susan has that question.
Susan, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I heard Mr. Sheridan's solicitor talk about bylaw number 2006-208. And my question is really, I suppose, for staff as to whether it is subsumed in bylaw 2021-44, where ownership of the entirety of Williams Lane was transferred to the Stinsons, in which case my understanding would be that responsibility for the private lane is the responsibility of the Stinsons and not the township, although we do have an obligation to assess that it is safer access and egress, and that it can be accessed by fire safety crews and so forth. And we've had those reports. So I just want to confirm what the status of 2006-208 is, given that it was raised by Mr. Sheridan's solicitor.
Kathy, I'm not sure if that's something that you would like to speak to, but correct me if I'm wrong, but the bylaw in 2021, when we stopped up and closed the road, it made that road the responsibility of the Stinsons.
Correct. You are correct, Abby.
Okay. All right, I'm going to read the motion, and if there's any further discussion, we can do that at the end. This is for the right-of-way. Moved by Lynn Clegg, seconded by Nikki Gowdy, that consent application APPN-2024-0018 Stinson for part of Lot 6, Concession 8, 1441 Williams Lane, Olden District, Central Frontenac, be approved to grant a right-of-way to provide deeded access to both the severed and retained parcels in application APPN-2024-0017. So we do this now and then go here?
Yeah.
Okay, so all those is there any more questions or comments? All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried. And part of the motion is that the Secretary Treasurer shall issue the notice of decision in accordance with the requirements of the Planning Act, including providing the notice of decision to the applicant, any person or public body that made a written request to be notified, and any other person or public body prescribed, and further that all conditions outlined in the notice of decision shall be completed and the certificate of official issued within a period of 2 years after the notice of decision was issued as required by the Planning Act. All those in favor again? No, I guess we've already done that.
Yeah.
This is a different motion.
Yeah.
Sorry, folks. Got caught up with the middle. All right. So this is now the actual severing the property. This is moved by Bill Everett and seconded by Lynn Clegus that consent application APPN 2024-0017 Stinson for part of Lot 6 Concession 8, 1441 Williams Lane, Olden District, Central Frontenac, be approved to sever and convey a 2.9 hectare 7.16606 acre parcel as a new lot, that the proposed severed parcel will be regularly shaped with approximately 232 meters, 761 feet of frontage on Leggett Lake, and that this lot be assessed via an extension to the existing Williams Lane that will cross over the retained parcel. Any discussion on that? All those in favor? Any opposed? Carried. That the Secretary Treasurer shall issue the notice of decision in accordance with the requirements of the Planning Act, including providing the notice of decision to the applicant, any person or body that made a written request to be notified, and any other person or public body prescribed, and further that all conditions outlined in the notice of decision shall be completed and the certificate of official issued within a period of 2 years after the notice of decision was issued as required by the Planning Act. So that is approved. All right. That is it. There are no other applications. There's no minor variance. Is there any other planning business?
No, there is not.
We have a motion of adjournment. Moved by Bill Everett, seconded by Dan. Oh, Dan, you can come back now. Mr. Meeks. Oh, there he is. Okay, moved by Bill Everett, seconded by Dan Meeks, that this meeting be adjourned until 5 p.m. October the 8th, 2024, virtually and in person at the Oso Hall, Garrett Street, Sharbot Lake, or at the call of the chair. All those in favor? Carried.
Adjourned at 5:47.